under Khrushchev and Stalin? And I said, well, I think I do, Dr. Gould, but, please elaborate, right? And he said that old women would be carried off because they had wrapped their china in newspaper and the newspaper was too old. That newspaper obviously could reflect the party's position before a certain date. It gave everybody a sense of history, but they wanted to wipe that out. So they didn't want things recorded, chronicled, kept. And the fact is, to a much lesser extent, but to an extent that we must stand up, our party, my party, and I've been voting Republican since 1978 in the general election and since 1980 in the primary, is trying a little bit of that type of tactic. Now, I have a political sin to confess today. And I think it's important because they've been back to my home area, Ellis County, immediately south of Dallas. They've been on the phone pressuring people, and they're so sloppy, they pressured some of my friends, and they called me up and they said, Paul, they're digging deep. They're looking for dirt. Well, they'll probably find a little. I'm not a perfect vessel, but I think I have a great message, and that's about rule of law and treating everybody fairly and bringing people into the party, not running them off. But let me confess one sin of mine. In 1978, I was 18 years old. I was very, very, very impressionable. And I believe that I was goaded into voting in the Democratic primary when I was 18. I want to confess that I voted for Phil Gramm in the Democrat primary, and I didn't vote for him just once. I was a real Democrat. I voted for him twice because there was a runoff. All right? But later that fall, as a freshman at Baylor University, I did it one step better. I did a little good. I served on a calling committee for Bill Clements when I was in Clinton County, and he was elected our first Republican governor since Reconstruction. Now, we have a Republican Party that's gone through several waves of new folks. And the first wave that I remember were the Reagan people. They were the new folks. And they were not to be trusted. And they were scary. And they were extreme. And they were right-wing. All right? But you know what? Without the Reagan people, we wouldn't have a Republican Party in this state. And I'm proud to say I was one of them. And then a little later on, as Tim was representing, the Pat Robertson people came in. And they were scary. All right? But some of them became hard party workers and helped us grow. And often they adopted limited government outlooks that they didn't already have them. They were important to the growth of this party. Now I see the same game being played again with Ron Paul supporters. Only we're not going to let them get away with it. Because Ron Paul supporters need to come into this party, because I'm already here, and no secret, I voted for Ron in the primary, and I've been a big admirer of Ron for a long time. But it's important that we embrace and grow the party with our fellow conservatives and conservative thinkers, rather than run them off, keep them at a distance. That's truly politically incorrect. And we cannot afford to let this party become the minority party in the state through exclusionary policies of a few people who are afraid that their egos might get hurt, or that we might hurt the feelings of somebody in a primary, or that we might have a little different position on some issue, because there is nothing more important than restoring constitutional government to our nation and our state. There's nothing more important than limited government. There's been something sticking in my craw lately, and I won't keep you much longer, but there's been something sticking in my craw about how we approach issues. We need to make sure the Republican Party is relevant to the middle-class voter and, yes, even the working poor. Eminent domain is something that most people can't afford to fight. So therefore, it needs to be narrow, it needs to be defined by the law, and we need to be consistent in its use with the ideas of the Founding Fathers.
That's right.
And along those lines, the Trans-Texas Toll Road, as it's written about in the enabling legislation, needs to be Trans-Texas gone. Recently, an urban blogger, and I appreciate the press because he spelled my name right, but he said, Paul Perry's stand on the Trans-Texas corridor will go over well with rural voters. Does he think that urban voters don't care about political sovereignty or cherished rights, or letting a foreign corporation use the powers of our government to enrich itself in a monopoly manner? I think urban voters care about that. Urban voters? And I know urban Republicans care about that issue. So I'm going to leave you with this. The Republican Party on the national level says we're a party of inclusion and favoritism towards none. I believe in rule of law. I believe in fair application of rules. As someone, as a man of faith, as a guy that, you know, has to pray every night because I have 8 kids.